The wind was thick with ash, a low, gritty hum in the air like the earth itself was still groaning. Somewhere beneath the splintered ribs of a collapsed house, something small moved, a twitch of fur, a soft whimper like breath, trying to find its way home. The structure was no longer a house, but a graveyard of memories. Broken porcelain figures, torn fabric, a refrigerator crushed flat like a metal accordion. And under it all, pressed into a pocket of barely their air, a single eye blinked against the dust. He was silent. The kind of silence that only comes from pain too deep to bark. Legs pinned, ribs rising slow and unsteady. His name had once meant something. Jasper. It used to be yelled from the porch, called through open fields, whispered into fur at night. But now it was just a ghost of sound beneath the wreckage buried with him. Time was folding in. The sun was fading behind smoke, and every second that passed was a second closer to his final breath. But someone was listening, and that changed everything. It didn't scream. That was the worst part. The earth didn't crack open like some biblical warning. It just gave way, a slow groan, deep and low, like a tired sigh after centuries of holding still. The hillside had been soaked for days. Rain falling so relentlessly it felt less like weather and more like punishment. And when the soil finally loosened, it came down with the quiet fury of something inevitable. It was the silence afterward that made people cry. In the southern edge of the valley, where the road dipped past a row of old cottages, a home named 312 Waverly was swallowed whole. It happened in seconds. One moment it stood, white shutters, red roof, tulips trembling in their box, and the next it folded like wet paper beneath a soge of earth and stone and twisted timber. The family had been gone, a wedding out of town, but Jasper had stayed behind. The neighbors didn't hear barking, just the slide, the thud, the dust rising like smoke into the air. By the time Eli arrived, everything had already collapsed. He hadn't been called. He came because he had to. Because when the radio mentioned landslides near Waverly Hill, his chest had tightened in a way he couldn't ignore. Eli was 23, with the kind of youth that carried both recklessness and ruin. He hadn't rescued anyone before, but he remembered what it felt like to be too late. He parked his rusted truck on the shoulder, boots sliding in the slick mud, and followed the shouting voices down the hill. Emergency crews were everywhere, neon vests and panicked movements. But most of them had moved on to other homes. The wreckage at 312 was deemed uninhabited. No one to save, they said. But something pulled Eli toward it. Not logic, not even hope. Just that awful familiar tug in the gut, the one that told you something was still alive. He didn't hear the whimper at first, just the sound of rain tapping against metal and wood. Then a creak, like breath shifting through broken beams. He stopped, crouched low, and pressed his ear against the ruin. There was again. Barely a sound, a kind of trembling, a pause between heartbeats. He didn't call out. He just started digging, with his hands first, pulling away splinters and shingles, ignoring the sting in his palms. Every piece he lifted felt like disturbing a grave. The smell was thick, damp wood, crushed insulation, and something else, the metallic edge of fear. His breath caught, and then, under what once was a door frame, he saw it, formatted and caked in dirt. A paw, twitching. "Hey," he whispered, choking on dust. "Hey, I see you!" The dog didn't move much, just opened one eye, slow and heavy, and looked at him. Not a bark, not a cry, just breath. Jasper. Eli didn't know his name then, but something in that look, quiet, pleading, too tired to be afraid, hit like memory, like firelight and smoke, and the weight of a collar he never got a hold again. He dropped to his knees, hand trembling as it reached toward the wreckage. "I'm not leaving," he said, as if promising it to himself more than anything. The storm had taken the world. But this heartbeat in the dark wasn't gone yet, and he wasn't going to let it go. The rain had softened into a slow, chilling mist, but the cold had begun to settle deep into Eli's bones. He barely noticed. His fingers were raw, nails rimmed with blood and earth. Every breath he took felt like a small betrayal, a reminder that the dog beneath the splintered world might not be breathing much longer. The pocket Jasper was trapped in wasn't large. A coffin of twisted 2x4's glass, and what looked like an entire kitchen cupboard collapsed on its side. The only reason the dog had survived the initial collapse was that a beam had fallen just right, creating a hollow too small for a human, but just enough for a curled-up dog. Eli crouched low, pushing aside a rusted pan, then a child's plastic toy, a red fire truck with its wheels broken. He tasted rust in his mouth. Every few seconds, Jasper's chest rose. Barely, like he wasn't sure if life was still worth clinging to. The memory came uninvited. A fire years ago. Different town, different smell, smoke instead of soil. His family had lived in a small home tucked behind a grove of pines. He was 17. The wind had knocked down a power line. By the time anyone noticed, the living room was already gone. He remembered the heat, the screams, but mostly he remembered the collar. Blue, burned at the edges. He'd found it hours later, buried in ash. His dog's name was Max. He hadn't made it out. Eli never forgave himself. He never stopped hearing that bark through the flames. Now, beneath the debris of someone else's nightmare was another dog, still alive, still holding on, and Eli swore he would not lose him. He whispered things, soft nonsense, like he was trying to keep Jasper tethered to the world. Almost there. Buddy, you're doing so good. Just hang on. The dog's eye tracked him weakly, a quiet trust forming like frost melting under a hesitant sun. He needed help, but calling for it meant walking away, and walking away meant maybe never coming back. So he stayed. He worked. The wood was sharp. His right forearm bled where a nail had bitten him. He tied his hoodie sleeve around it and kept going. He started using a crowbar someone had left nearby. He pried, levered, groaned under the weight. The dog flinched once when a plank shifted. A broken yelp swallowed by pain. "I know," Eli said, crouching lower. "I know it hurts. I'm right here." A few more inches of space opened up, enough to see Jasper's muzzle, crusted with dirt and blood, and those ribs, too visible, starved, trapped too long. He didn't know how long the dog had been down there, maybe 2 days, maybe longer. He found a water bottle in his backpack and poured a capful. Slid it forward slowly. Jasper sniffed it, then licked, weak, barely able to move his tongue. "You're a fighter," Eli whispered, feeling the burn rise behind his eyes. The wreckage groaned. Eli froze. Somewhere above, a loose board slipped, sending a hiss of dirt and plaster dust down over them. He shielded the dog with his back, heart thudding in his throat. Every second now was a gamble. The structure wasn't stable. Every move he made might bring the rest down, but leaving wasn't an option. That decision had been made the moment Jasper looked at him. He worked slower, more precise. Each shift of debris was like surgery. Sometimes he paused just to listen, to count the space between the dog's breaths like they were holy. Sometimes Jasper whimpered. Sometimes he just looked at him, that eye growing duller, and Eli talked. He told him about Max, about the fire, about how he never got the chance to say goodbye, about how he used to lay next to his dog on the grass behind the house, listening to cicadas and pretending he could understand every thought behind those brown eyes. "I should have gone back in," he whispered. "I was too scared. I froze." Jasper blinked slowly, as if to say he understood, as if it didn't matter now. "But I'm not leaving you." More debris moved. The light shifted, sharper now, piercing through a gap above them as the clouds broke for just a moment. Dust glittered in it like gold. Eli reached in, slid his hand along the dog's neck, gentle. Jasper didn't flinch. He leaned in. Their foreheads touched for a moment, dirt against dirt, breath against breath. "Almost there, buddy. Almost there." Outside, the wind picked up again. The storm wasn't over, but inside that ruin something was beginning. A bond. Fragile. Unspoken. Like hope crawling out from under the weight of everything that tried to bury it. The beam shifted again just after midnight. A deep creak, followed by a jolt of splinters falling from above. Eli barely had time to throw himself sideways before part of the upper floor gave out, crashing inches from where Jasper lay. It missed him, but barely. Jasper cried out then, a strangled, weak sound, more breath than voice. Eli's stomach turned. This was too dangerous. He sat back on his heels, panting, chest heaving. The air inside the collapsed home was thick now, like breathing through cloth. His face was streaked with grime, sweat, and tears he wasn't sure had ever stopped falling. His fingers shook, not from fear, from knowing. He couldn't do this alone. But if he left, even for a moment, he looked at Jasper. The dog had closed his eyes again, ribs fluttering like leaves in a storm. He cursed, loud. Hit a beam with the side of his fist and bit back a scream. Then he sat in the dark beside the dog, hand resting on the fragile curve of Jasper's neck. "I'm not losing you," he whispered. Not again. Not this time. But the wreckage was groaning louder now. The weight of it, the Earth's hunger, Ali could feel it, that slow, indifferent pull of gravity. It didn't care about redemption. It didn't care about past sins or second chances. He needed to choose. Stay and maybe die trying. Or leave and maybe live with another ghost. The storm outside cracked again, thunder closer. The smell of ozone. He thought of Max, of the way he'd smelled after a bath. The way he used to fall asleep in Eli's lap like nothing in the world could touch him. He thought of the collar, half melted. He stood. He yelled for help. A raw, throat-tearing scream. "Over here! I've got to go! Hello!" He screamed again and again, until his voice broke, and somewhere in the distance, finally, a voice shouted back, then another, then flashlights, boots, pounding mud. Help was coming, and he'd bought them just enough time. Jasper's eye opened one more time. Not wide, just enough, like he'd heard, like he knew. The beams above cracked like gunfire when the firefighters arrived. The whole structure moaned, as if it had been waiting to exhale for hours. Waiting for someone else to hold the weight so it could finally let go. Eli stumbled back as 3 emergency workers crawled in, calling to one another in clipped, precise commands. Their eyes widened when they saw him. His face a patchwork of grime and dried blood, clothes soaked, eyes wild. But they didn't waste time asking questions. "Dog's alive," Eli rasped. "Down there, almost out. But if we move the wrong way, we've got it." One of them nodded, already kneeling where Eli had just been. A second slid in beside him with braces, wedges, and a makeshift sling. The third placed a steady hand on Eli's shoulder. "You did good, kid." Eli didn't reply. His eyes were on Jasper, still trapped, still barely breathing. The dog had grown quieter since the collapse. No more sounds. Just a gentle lift and fall of his ribs, spaced wider apart now. The lead firefighter, a woman with deep lines in her face and mud streaked across her cheek, reached in first. Her voice was soft, like someone speaking to a sleeping child. "Hey, sweetheart," she murmured. "We're going to get you out now." It took 15 minutes. 15 unbearable minutes of bracing the ceiling, shifting weight, one piece at a time. The sling came last, slipped beneath Jasper's midsection, carefully lifted inch by inch. He let out a soft moan when his leg moved, the one pinned too long, but didn't resist. Eli thought that was what broke him most. The dog didn't fight. He had nothing left. When they finally pulled him free, he wasn't much more than bones and dirt and breath. His fur was matted with blood, his paws raw and cracked. One ear was torn, his eyes barely opened, but he was out. Eli sank to his knees, hands shaking, unable to stop the tears. "Ride with him," someone said. And he did. The ambulance smelled like antiseptic and rain. It was too cold, too bright. But Eli didn't let go of Jasper's paw. Not once. He held it as they strapped him in, as the paramedic administered fluids, as the doors slammed shut and the world outside became a blur of lights and sirens and smoke rising from the hills. "You're not alone," Eli whispered, over and over. "Not anymore. Just breathe, okay? Just keep breathing." The vet clinic was a small outpost on the edge of town, the only one not closed down after the storm. They rushed Jasper in with all the urgency usually reserved for people. A woman in blue scrubs met them at the door. "He's in shock," she said. "And starvation. We need to stabilize him before anything else." Eli stayed in the waiting room, hands caked in blood that wasn't his. Shirt torn. He couldn't stop replaying it. The way Jasper had looked at him, at the very end, like he wasn't sure if it was okay to let go. He hadn't let go. A nurse brought him water. Someone else handed him a blanket. But all he could do was stare at the steel door where they'd taken the dog, his body refusing to believe it was over. Because it wasn't. Not until he knew Jasper would live. The minutes passed like ash in wind. Then hours. The vet came out around 3 a.m. She sat beside him, her expression carved from exhaustion and sympathy. "He's stable. For now," she said softly, "fractured leg, malnourished. But he's a fighter." Eli didn't speak. Couldn't. His body collapsed inward, breath hitching as if some invisible wire finally snapped inside his chest. "I think he survived because of you," the vet said. But Eli knew it was the other way around. 3 weeks passed before Jasper could stand on his own. He spent most of it in a recovery crate, legs bandaged, IV taped into his paw, muzzle wrapped in soft gauze. But his eyes changed, slowly, steadily, from dim to curious, from cloudy to clear. And every day Eli sat beside him. Sometimes he spoke, told Jasper about his dreams, about the storm, about Max. Other days he just sat in silence, legs folded, hand resting gently inside the crate so the dog could feel he wasn't alone. Jasper began to respond. A tail flick here, a slight lean of his head. One day he licked Ellie's palm. It was quiet, this part. No more sirens, no more collapsing wood or frantic digging. Just the slow rebuilding of two broken things that had found each other in the wreckage. Eli brought him home in early October. Not to the apartment he rented above the auto shop, but to a small cottage near the valley. The same one he'd grown up in. The one that had burned had been rebuilt, slowly over time. He walked Jasper through the door with a leash and collar, hands trembling. It was Blue. They stood in the doorway for a moment, man and dog, both a little thinner than they should be, both carrying ghosts. "Welcome home," Eli said. Jasper didn't bark. He never had. But he leaned into Eli's leg just slightly and let out a breath, soft, content. Weeks turned to months. They healed. Jasper's fur grew back. His eyes lit up when he saw squirrels. He began to run again, awkwardly at first, then with more grace than Eli thought possible. The limp never fully left. But neither did Eli's quiet devotion. Sometimes, at night, they sat on the porch together. The stars were sharp in the cold air, and the wind moved gently through the trees. Eli would rest a hand on Jasper's head and whisper something neither of them needed words to understand. You stayed. And beneath that broken sky, Jasper would press closer. A silent, steady answer. They had rescued each other. Not just from the storm, but from the long ache of loneliness that no one ever talks about. The kind that creeps in when the world forgets you. The kind that buries you in silence and waits. But Jasper had been found, and Eli had followed a voice that no one else had heard. Now, they were here, breathing, together. And the final image, the one that lingered like a quiet heartbeat long after the story ended, was this: a man and dog beneath a pale porch light, shadows long and gentle behind them, the world quiet, not broken, not perfect, just whole. At last, Jasper dreamed often now. His paws would twitch against the old wool rug, ears flicking, tail giving the occasional hopeful thump. Sometimes he barked in his sleep, small, muffled sounds like the echoes of a memory he was chasing through fog. Eli would sit nearby, watching with a strange mix of heartbreak and awe. He liked to think Jasper was running somewhere safer in those dreams. Somewhere open. Somewhere warm. The house was quiet most nights. Just the creak of old floorboards and the ticking of a clock that no longer kept perfect time. But that quiet wasn't empty the way it used to be. It held something now. A rhythm. A breath. Sometimes Eli caught himself still listening, the way he had under that collapsed house, for silence, for stillness, for loss. But Jasper always woke, always stretched, always looked at him with those deep brown eyes that said, "I'm still here." It had taken months for the weight in Eli's chest to ease. Guilt, after all, doesn't leave on command. It lingers, it roots, and when he passed the old scar on his forearm, the one left by the nail that bit him during the rescue, he would remember. Not with pain, but with clarity. Max, the fire, the silence that followed. He didn't blame himself anymore. Jasper had given him that, and in return, Eli had promised never to run from pain again. They had started walking every morning just after dawn, down the gravel path that ran past the orchard and into the valley. Jasper limped still, but it didn't stop him. His pace was determined, hopeful, like he had somewhere to be. Eli never used a leash anymore. They didn't need one. One morning, as the fog clung low and the dew traced silver lines through the grass, Jasper paused at the top of the hill. He turned back, ears perked, waiting for Eli to catch up. The rising sun hit his face just right, golden light on healed fur, on scars made soft by time. Eli froze. It hit him then, the moment. The full, aching weight of everything that had passed between them. Storm, the ruin, the silence, the breath, and the unthinkable beauty of the fact that Jasper had made it through. Not just survived, but returned. It was the kind of grace Eli never thought he'd deserve. He took a deep breath, chest swelling with cold morning air, and joined Jasper at the ridge. They stood side by side, looking out across the valley. Below, the world stretched open, unscarred now, quiet, endless. Eli reached down, resting his hand lightly against Jasper's head. "You made it," he whispered, and Jasper, in the simplest act of understanding, leaned into his side. No sound, no spectacle, just warmth, just light, just breath. That was how the story ended, not with fanfare, not with applause, but with a man, a dog, standing still in the silence they had once feared, where the light found them and stayed. Ely kept the collar, the first one, the blue one with the bent buckle and dirt-stained tag. He'd found it during Jasper's first real bath, buried in the folds of the emergency blanket they'd wrapped him in. He cleaned it gently, every loop and fray. Didn't fix it, just left it as it was. Evidence, a kind of truth. It hung by the door now, next to his keys. A reminder not of what had happened, but of what had almost been lost. What nearly disappeared into the earth without anyone knowing. Some nights, when Jasper was curled up on the couch, breathing soft and slow, Ely would stand at the window, collar in hand, and look out at the world. It never looked the same twice. Storms still came. The wind still roared sometimes threes like a voice half remembered. But now he didn't brace against it. He listened. Let it pass through. Because he knew what it meant to come out the other side. He'd stopped asking why the world had buried Jasper, and started marveling that it hadn't finished the job. Because what mattered more was that when the world gave up, when no one else thought to check that empty, ruined house, something inside Ely moved, not because he was a hero, but because he knew what it meant to be too late. And this time he hadn't been. He'd heard breath where no one else had, and breath meant life, and life was still worth fighting for. Jasper grew stronger in ways you couldn't see. He'd rest his head on Eli's lap now, fall asleep mid-step when the sun hit just right on the porch. He chased butterflies with a lazy sort of enthusiasm, tail wagging like a flag waving surrender to joy. He'd begun to trust again, not all at once, not in loud, dramatic leaps, but in quiet things. The way he'd lean into Eli's palm without flinching. The way he'd wait at the door when Evie left, knowing he'd come back. The way his breathing, when he slept, no longer sounded like survival, but peace. And Ely, he was learning too. To forgive himself, to show up. To understand that saving something doesn't always come with applause. Sometimes it's just a long road of small moments stitched together. A paw resting on your boot. A tail thumping against the floor. A single eye blinking back into the light. Sometimes rescue is just staying. Long enough, still enough, present enough, to witness healing when it finally begins. The last time Ely visited the old house, the ruin on Waverly Hill, it had been cleared, bulldozed. Nothing left but a flat plot of land overtaken by wildflowers. Someone had put up a fence. No one ever rebuilt. He stood at the edge for a while, hands in his jacket pockets, the wind tugging softly at the grass. Jasper sat beside him, watching a butterfly dance just out of reach. Neither of them moved. The place was unrecognizable, but not gone. No place is ever truly gone when something good survived it. Eli knelt slowly, arm resting gently over Jasper's back. "You know," he murmured, "sometimes I think you found me first." Jasper didn't respond, just turned his head, nuzzled closer into Eli's side, and for a moment, a breathless, golden moment, there was no wreckage, no storm, no past, just two survivors alive, together, still here. And as the sun slipped behind the trees, long shadows stretching across the earth like arms finally resting, a hush settled over the hill, soft and holy, the same hush from the day they met. But this time, it wasn't the silence of something ending, it was the silence of something beginning again. And that, quiet as breath, steady as trust, was enough. It always would be. Jasper passed his 10th birthday quietly. Eli didn't even realize the date until he saw it scrawled in faded ink on the old intake paperwork from the vet. A guess at best, just a month and a year, nothing more. No photos from puppyhood, no old chew toys, no before, just after. But that was okay. Not every life needs a documented beginning to be real. Some lives start in the middle, in wreckage, in mud, in a moment when you should have died but didn't. So Ely baked a lopsided carrot cake that Jasper barely sniffed, lit a single candle, and sat on the kitchen floor beside him. They shared a piece of chicken instead. Jasper's eyes flickered with lazy affection, tail tapping gently against the tile as Eli scratched behind his ears. "Double digits," he whispered, smiling softly. "Didn't think we'd make it here, did we?" Jasper blinked up at him with the kind of gaze only dogs know how to give, ancient and innocent at once. It was love, sure, but also something older. Gratitude shaped like silence, understanding that didn't need words. Outside, the wind stirred through the trees. A soft summer night, thick with stars. Eli left the door open that evening, let the breeze find its way inside. Jasper lay at the threshold, his head on his paws, half in the house, half out, a creature forever caught between two worlds, life and death, buried and breathing gone and found. And Eli watched him as he often did, quietly, reverently, because the thing was, Jasper didn't just survive the collapse. He became a compass in the years that followed, a kind of emotional tether, a reminder that some things are worth digging for, even if they look broken, even if the world says it's too late. Especially then, there were other rescues after Jasper, other storms, other hands reaching through rubble. Eli volunteered now, officially, trained with search and rescue teams, helped lift others from the same darkness that nearly took Jasper. But none of them ever hit quite the same way. None of them were his. Jasper was the only one who saw the whole of him. All his silent guilt, the way he flinched at sirens, the way he always sat with his back to the door, just in case. Jasper never asked him to be okay, just to be there, and Eli was, even as Jasper grew slower, even when the limp deepened and stares became hard, even when his eyes clouded and his breath wheezed in his chest. Eli stayed, because love, he'd learned, is not loud. It doesn't demand. It doesn't ask for proof. It just waits, quietly, beside you in the dark, until you're ready to walk into the light again. And one morning, it was spring again, damp earth and birdsong. Jasper didn't wake. He was on the porch, in the sun, curled the way he always did, facing east. Eli knew the moment he stepped outside. The stillness, the soft shape of his body at rest, the peace in it. It didn't break him. It hollowed him gently, like a bell. He knelt beside Jasper, pressed his forehead to that soft, graying fur, and let the silence come. Not the terrible kind from the collapse, but the silence that kills. But the silence that says thank you. That says you mattered. That says we made it. He buried Jasper in the orchard, beneath a tree that bloomed white in the spring. No marker. Just a collar hung on a low branch, swaying in the breeze. And every year after that, when the petals fell like slow snow across the earth, Ellie would sit under that tree and remember. Not just the rescue, but the life that came after. The mornings, the tail wags, the porch sun, the healing. He told the story sometimes, to neighbors, to new volunteers, to kids who asked why he carried a frayed blue leash in his truck. But mostly, he told it to himself, on quiet nights, under sharp stars, with the wind pressing soft against the windows. And always, it ended the same way, with the memory of one eye blinking through dust. One breath. Still there, still holding on, until someone finally listened and answered back. Years later, when the lines old and the lines around his eyes had deepened into quiet kindness, people still asked about the dog, the one from the storm. And he'd smile then, not sad, just softened, and glance toward the orchard, where petals still fell every spring like a memory returning home. He never told the story quite the same way twice. Because it wasn't just a story. It was a promise, a turning point, a tether to the part of himself that once knelt in the dirt beside a dying creature and whispered, "You're not alone." And sometimes, when the wind came from the east and the trees swayed just right, he swore he stirred Jasper breathing beside him. Not a ghost, not grief, just presence, stillness, gratitude. That was the thing about rescue. It didn't always look like sirens and floodlights. Sometimes it was two beings buried beneath the weight of the world, choosing, against all odds, to live. And in the quiet just before the last light slipped below the hills, Eli would close his eyes and remember the sound that changed everything. Not a cry, not a bark, just the fragile, defiant rhythm of a heartbeat, still going, still here, still holding on.